All electrolyte and hydration mixes and drinks are not created equal. I mean, check the ingredients. They have sugar or sugar alternatives, and there's tons of added stuff. Allow me to introduce you to the best electrolyte mix, Light Balance, Lyte balance.com. It's a naked electrolyte mix, which means no preservatives, no sweeteners, no flavoring, no caffeine or gluten, and no calories. I'm always on the search for the best hydration, and I've found it. My entire family uses it, and I use it on all my runs. It's solved all my hydration issues. Your body needs magnesium, potassium, and sodium, which Light Balance conveniently provides in liquid or powder form. Pure, powerful hydration. Light Balance. Go to lytebalance.com.
Tell me when we're
Our guest today on the Mental Toughness podcast, joining me is the Vice President of Coaching at Ernest Packaging Solutions. Ernest is a company that's not only disrupting the package industry with bold creativity, customer-centric solutions, but they redefine what it means to build a thriving, resilient culture in a fast-moving business world. Our guest today's journey is anything but conventional, with a background spans leadership development, organizational psychology, and hands-on team coaching. He's built a career focused on unlocking human potential at scale. At Ernest, his role goes far beyond traditional management. As VP of coaching, he leads a team dedicated to helping employees grow personally and professionally, aligning individual purpose with company's vision in a way that drives both performance and fulfillment. Ernest has embraced a coaching culture rooted in radical candor, continuous learning, and intentional growth, which is proof that if you invest in the people first, everything else follows. If you're a founder, a people leader, business owner, this episode is for you. Our guest today, I'm excited for this because he is a great individual. Travis Smith, my man, Travis. Bud, thanks for joining, man.
Rob, good to be here. Been looking forward to this one. Appreciate the invite. Excited to chat with you.
So, if you had a non-fictional character, who would you pick?
I love that question.
You do?
Love,
It's good, man. Maybe I
yeah,
should, maybe I'll preface it for the listeners, right? Like we're on a group call because we've known each other for a while, and I also do like some coaching at with Ernest. And I wasn't ready for the question at all. And you asked, "Hey, what's the if you had to pick a non-fictional character, go." And it's really the only time I kind of got frozen up. I mean, my mind could not think. I was just thinking about other stuff. I couldn't dial in, and I came up with something, which was fine, except when it came around to Coach Campy, he took the answer that I've always waited, I think, my entire life for, and that was Roy Hobbs. And it was like, I was just kicking myself, like, dude, why didn't you pick Roy Hobbs? You've always waited for that moment, and that was it. But I always loved that one, so I just wanted to throw it back, man. If you had a non-fictional character, who would you pick?
yeah. And I remember, Rob, too, when I put you on the spot, you're like, man, I'm not, you know, I'm not loving the on the spot thing. So that was good. That was good payback. When I shared before, I actually said Mrs. Doubtfire. I don't know if you remember that or not.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, I just thought Robin Williams was so talented at what he could do, and the just the whole presence that he had with switching roles, and also the family piece of it and going through that. I just remember as a little kid watching that. So unconventional to say the least. But I'm gonna stick with that one, man.
Yeah. Well done, man. Well done. I did not remember that, but yeah, what a great acting job, man. I mean, I don't know how many times we've seen that one because that thing is just so funny.
Yeah, I watched it on repeat till repeat as long as I can remember. It was one of those ones that we had. So
So one of the reasons that I do the podcast is I love talking about hinge moments of individuals. And I want to talk about yours, one of the initial ones. You are a student at BYU University, you're a freshman, and after your freshman year, you have an opportunity to move to Austin, Texas. And I think I'll just let you take it from there.
yeah, well, I was approached by a friend who had been going out during the summers and selling door to door. And during after my freshman year, I had to come up with some funds. I had to figure out how I was going to pay for the next semester. So I'd actually signed up for an on-campus job. It was a janitorial job. And so I remember it's $13 an hour. And this this friend said, hey, you can make more money if you go out to Austin, Texas. He was talking, it's double the money you could make on campus. And so I figured I had nothing left to lose. So I got in my 1990 Honda Civic. I remember I drove from Provo, Utah, straight down to Austin, Texas. I'd never been that direction before. And then we moved in with, I think there's 14 or 16 guys. And the next morning we started knocking on doors. And it was one of those things where I was so confident going into it that I could figure it out. And the first day, there was nothing. I didn't make any sales. And I remember going, I think I worked 12 hours, knocked on doors, over 100 doors. And I thought, oh man, I could have made, 100 and something bucks if I were cleaning toilets right now. So I had a lot of doubt come in my mind. Day two, the same thing happened. So now I'm like, man, I work 20, 25 hours, 2 days in a row. And I think that I should probably drive home. And I remember I didn't have much, so it wasn't that hard to pack up. And I remember that tension in the morning. Like, I remember thinking, well, this could go one of two ways. I drive home. And at the time I was like, man, that's gonna be a couple $100 worth of gas. Or I stay there and try another day, try day number three. And I had a mentor, Skeeter Ellison at the time. And I remember he said, hey, I'm going to give you a book. It's Think and Grow Rich. Before you go home, I just want you to read the book. Like, will you read this book before you leave? And I was like, all right, that's fair. So I remember that night reading, and I got to the chapter about desire. And something inside of me started talking. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go out. I'm going to go out one more day. So that decision, I think Skeeter handed me that book, and then my commitment to read that book, specifically that chapter on desire, and that burning that I had inside, took me to a small town. I remember it's called Bertram, outside of Austin. And all morning I was knocking on doors, and came across a house. Said, I'm Travis, selling Dish Network. And she says, oh, I've been thinking about that. I've been thinking about getting a dish. And then I said, well, what's kept you from getting one? She said, nothing's kept me from getting one. So I pulled out the paperwork, started going. And I remember the feeling that I had, this whole thing of confidence. I was like, all right, if I can do one more of those, then that was a day of cleaning toilets. And the very next door, my body language changed. The way that I spoke changed. And I realized something about myself, that momentum mattered. And that confidence and that approach started getting refined on day three. And so the next question I asked when they opened the door was, my name's Travis, Dish Network. Have you ever thought about getting a satellite dish? So I used what Dolly said. I've been thinking about it. And yeah, I have thought about it. Okay, what's kept you from getting it? Then he went through and we had a conversation about it. So, but that moment of getting in the car and deciding to drive to Bertram instead of back to Provo, that to me was the Hinge moment, that led me and opened up so many more things for my career and where I went.
And so that third day, so you even remember her name, Dolly.
I do remember her name. I remember her name because it was so pivotal. I remember the way that I felt standing on the door when I realized that it was possible. I realized that it was possible.
And then take us further into that because you had to, I mean, you were at the time where you had to get social security numbers from people, right? I mean, that's no easy thing, man. I don't know if you could do that now, but man,
Yeah, not when you meet somebody on the door for the first time. And it was challenging. And I realized that was an objection that came up. We also had to get a credit card number, and we actually had to call in and build a credit card at least $1 to make sure it worked. So yeah, getting a social security number and a credit card number, that was a whole nother uh, learning point on how to do that and develop enough trust with the individual that they were comfortable sharing that.
Hmm. Talk to us about that because I mean, you developed a really specific system of trust. Delve into that further, Travis, because I really just love the way you embrace that and how you took that to the next level.
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is that I didn't want to show up and beat around the bush to what I was doing. And I feel like if when I would do that, people could read into that and there was a lack of trust. Somebody knocks on your door, it's like, what are you selling? And I would just say Dish Network. It wasn't, well, I'm just out in the neighborhood and I'm, signing some people up. It was just like I'm selling Dish Network. And I felt like that approach, they were like, okay, at least this guy's honest with me.
Hmm.
And then I did develop the system and I actually modeled the have you ever thought about getting a satellite dish? And what I realized, it was either they said yes or they said no. And if they said yes, my next question was, have you what kept you from getting one? And then I'd get the objection and I'd flush it out. Now, sometime in there, something personal, some connection would happen. Maybe I would see something or they would talk about a specific channel and I'd ask them, what they watch on the channel. And that just opened up a whole conversation, right? Maybe it's watching a game with their family or their son, talking about the son, really connecting at some level with them. And I actually started really enjoying getting to know people at that level. So, and if they said no, I've never thought about it, then it's a great time to think about it. So I just went down that approach and started on that. But I did look for little moments to connect, but it wasn't necessarily because I wanted to make the sale, Rob. It's because genuinely I felt a desire to connect with other people. It
Hmm.
felt really meaningful to have some level of conversation.
And so when you started to get that momentum piece and that confidence, it did it remove that pressure for you? Because I mean, I know you had the numbers you wanted to hit, but you have a goal of hey, connecting with people, genuine interest in people, general curiosity, ask good questions. Um, did you feel then, hey, did the pressure kind of leave you at that point and you just really stayed focused on your process, what you had to do?
Yeah, I think I realized that worrying about if the next one was going to be what the result was, the more I worried about that, the more anxious I became. And then I became tense. I became not my authentic self. And so, yeah, I think looking back, that pressure, I knew I could work hard. I knew I could hit the doors and I knew that I could put the numbers in. And I knew that I could pick up little techniques along the way. And so as I focused on that and the pressure was released off of, my goal was two a day. My goal was to get two sales a day. That was going to be enough to beat being a janitor at school in the summer. So I knew that, and I knew in order to get that burning desire just needed to live. And if I let that burning desire live, and had that vision of two a day. And this is where I learned positive affirmations, self-talk. And Napoleon Hill talks all about those principles in there. And I started just trying them out and speaking about those out loud, some of those things that I believed about myself. Because you face rejection door after door after door. And after 100 or so, you're hearing the same thing. You're hearing, and I believe that the mind is starting to, even in some ways, believe what you're hearing, that there was nobody else knocking with me. There was nobody to give me the support except for me. So I wrote down a little saying that I would say in between the doors. And I remember to this day exactly what I said every time.
Please.
Yeah, I am Travis Smith and I am my greatest ally. I achieve for the sake of achievement. Let's fly. And then I walked off, went to the next door.
What was the Let's Fly?
Yeah, Let's Fly was speaking to all the parts of me, the part of me that was confident, the part of me that was, a little bit maybe frustrated, taking it personal, feeling rejected. So just talking to my whole self is what I was bringing in. So I said, let's fly. I'm talking to the confident part, the rejected part, and really just picking myself up as a whole.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I do want to delve into that, but one of the things that also struck me as well is the system that you developed in terms of your watch, and you'd even have chalk on your shoe. Like, talk to us about how dialed in you got to that part of your process.
Yeah. I mean, I realized that it really was how many doors could I knock? I figured I'm getting some number of sales to some number of doors. I knew there was a ratio. I just didn't know what it was. So I thought if I kept track of that, then that would give me some momentum, some confidence, meaning if I knew it took me 100 doors, if I'm on 99, I know something good's about to happen. So that would actually get me more excited because I knew it was just about to happen. So I had a watch that it turned 60 times. And I thought, well, I'm not going to bring a clicker. The other thought I had was bringing like a clicker and keeping track of how many doors I knocked on. But I used my watch. And I remember it was just above 60 doors. And that was the average I got a sale. I measured it for about a week.
Hmm.
And I thought, okay, so if I could do, let's say, 10 more doors a day, then I would get one additional sale working 6 days a week. So now that became a game of, okay, I could do five before I would usually start and five after. I could cut my lunchtime down and get 10 more doors in that way. So whatever way I was going to do it, I just know I needed to do 10 more.
Hmm.
And so one of the things I realized that I was writing down during the day, a lot of people were gone. So I would write down the house numbers in the street on a pad of paper. And I realized that I was standing on the street looking for the house number, and that was taking some time to do that. 30 seconds, but it was still taking time. So I was looking for an easier way not to have to worry about that and getting the house number right. So I took a bigger piece of chalk and I taped it to my shoe. And when somebody was not home during the day, I wanted to come back that night. So I would actually just clip the curb on the way out and I would leave a chalk mark. And then when I came back after 5 o'clock, people are starting to get home. To make sure I wasn't going to the same door twice in a day, I would just walk down the street and look for the chalk mark.
Hmm.
So I picked up, if you think about 30 seconds to write that street number down, and I'm knocking on 120 doors a day, well, that's a lot of time that I picked up. So, that chapter about desire and about creative energy and about thinking of things that do exist and putting them together, or thinking of things that don't exist in a process. So that was just creative will and desire. And so I just taped that piece of chalk, walked by, got more, kept track on my watch. What I realized is over the course of time, I became a lot better. And so my ratio went down below 60, and then it went down to 30. And so at my very best, I could knock on 30 doors, and then I could do the process because I felt so comfortable with it. So if I
Hmm.
knocked on 25, that's fine. And if I got to 35, now it's just a matter of the next one or two. So I would walk faster, I'd speak more confidently. So a lot was showing up and being developed that I didn't even realize at that time, Rob. And I think looking back, it was really a an experience not only of grit and connection with people, what sales meant. It actually shifted my degree. So I went back and I shifted what I was studying because I enjoyed it and it became such a game. I've always been super competitive. And so competing against myself, and then the next summer I went back to a different city. And then the next summer I went back, and then I did it 4 years in a row. I did it all through college.
Hmm.
And every summer I got better. But yeah, at the end it was 30 doors. So if I could knock on 120 doors, I was getting four sales.
But you started to get a team underneath you at that point as well, right?
Yeah, I started knocking the way it was set up. could recruit your own office. So the second year I was a sales manager. So during the school year, I would knock on doors and I would recruit people to come out the next summer. So I would build my own team. I think 16 or 20 individuals. Um, Sometimes married couples would come out together. And, I really viewed my job as connecting with each one of them. I felt a duty to really pour into them because they put a lot of faith into me. And I wanted to reciprocate that back, to give back that kind of faith and trust.
Right.
And so I developed a management style. We'd meet every morning. We'd have a quick meeting. We'd report how many sales we got the next day. At the time, other offices would fax us what they got, so there was a lot of competition going on. And then it'd just be a game of every day just going out to win.
Mm-hmm. You talked about and you mentioned authentic self. And I know that's developed obviously throughout the years. And I know it's one of those things that kind of get thrown out there as like a punchline, but I was hoping you could talk to that in terms of the authenticity and being able to show up as your authentic self.
Yeah, it's a great question, and you do hear it a lot. Authenticity. I think for me, being authentic is not necessarily, and often it is not reacting or reacting in the moment. It's understanding what the driving factors are for me. It's when I'm at my best, who am I being? How am I showing up? What I believe about myself. And I think in order to find out who we are, like that question, who are you? I found myself spending a lot of time, you know, am I frustrated? Yeah, those are all things that show up. But when I tap into my authentic self, I think of three words. I think of tapping into like something I can go back to and really peeling back those layers in that onion. And I feel like if I can be the best version of myself, inspiring, courageous, and powerful, then when I show up to a conversation, I remind myself, hey, when I'm my best, when I'm authentic, I'm courageous. I can enter into this conversation showing up that way, or be inspiring and inspire myself, inspire others. So I do think that if individuals can really discover in themselves who they truly are, then whatever the circumstance is, they'll be at their very best in that moment if they can tap in and remind themselves who you really are.
Hmm. Could you share with us like that exercise that you get into? So inspirational, courageous, powerful.
Yeah.
Talk to us about like what's that actual exercise that you do for your teams, leading them to helping each individual get to their authentic self? Because I always love that
Yeah.
one. I think one's powerful.
Yeah. And I experienced this myself and it just really resonated. And so I've carried it with me. But this is really getting past the um, conscious, sort of calculated, what answer should I be giving? And so I have a group of people support an individual, usually it's four or five, and they're asking the same question repeatedly, which is, who are you? And at the beginning, what I've noticed is people kind of get stuck and they sort of say the thing that is maybe conscious or with other people around what they want to be seen as, or maybe trying to figure out what the right word would be to say in that moment in a corporate setting. But the more that you go in this, the more I think you tap into other things start showing up because you're not now thinking about it. You're just speaking from the heart. You're speaking from the gut. You're speaking from a different place when you're having to do it repetitiously. And so the exercise goes on for a couple minutes with the same question, who are you? And I encourage those participants to act like they really care about that individual, not just act like they really care, but as they do, you can you can uh, you can perform in a way that changes the thought process, right? You can act yourself into better thinking, and you can think your way into better acting, and that's something that I've picked up from you. And so even if it seems weird or funny, just step into it and trust. And when people come across a word that they truly believe in their body that comes out from a different place, you can see it, you can
Hmm.
feel it. And it's incredible how everybody almost like, oh, wow, okay, that felt really true, what you just said about yourself. And they take note of what that word was. At the end of the exercise, they go around the table and they share, I felt this when you said that word about yourself, whatever it is. um Integrity, powerful, so vulnerable, honest, courageous, heartfelt, whatever the way of being is, they can feel it in themselves. And it doesn't take long for each individual to feel like when they're at their best, when they're grounded into who they are, that they can then remind themselves. And so I do encourage them to write those words down. And then at the very end, they say what the three words are.
Hmm.
And it sounds like, I am a powerful, authentic, courageous leader. And then everybody around them says, yes, you are. And so it becomes a moment of self talk where they're saying it about themselves and believing. And I think, there's so much negativity that goes around, especially in a sales driven organization. You're hearing no way more than you're hearing yes. And so this is where we get to tap into where the real power comes from. And so that's a little bit about the exercise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me ask you something. So with courageous being one of yours, what happens like if you aren't feeling, if you're not feeling it, it's one of your core values though. What do you have to do if you've identified a core value? And I'm just using courageous, right? And
Yeah.
but you just find that, man, I'm not operating that way. What do you do?
Well, the first thing I do is, one, awareness.
Hmm.
I have to be aware that I'm not showing up in the best way. I'm not being the best version. And I think sometimes we get going so quickly that we're not even realizing. So checking in with myself throughout conversation, throughout meetings, throughout facilitation, it's okay. Quick check in. Also asking other people. But if we can be aware of what's going on, then we can be at choice. If we're not aware, then there's only one pathway, and that's what we're doing, and we're blind to it. So sometimes it's helpful for other people to say, hey, I see a blind spot. You're not acting in authenticity, or within myself. So that's the first thing, is to be aware. And then the second thing is to just remind myself, and I do it in my mind and out loud, which is to say, I'm a courageous leader. I'm a courageous leader. And to tap into that core, then I'm able to, in a better way, step into the situation. And a lot of what we deal with is just conversations,
Hmm.
right? Whether it be with a client, whether it be with another team member or ourselves, maybe it's a leader, but to step into that. So I just say it. I'm a courageous leader. I'm Travis Smith. Goes back to the door to door days. I'm
Right.
Travis Smith and I'm my greatest ally. I achieve for the sake of achievement. So yeah, I think it is self
Keep
talk.
keep going.
Yeah, let's fly.
Let's fly, baby.
That's it.
Um, Travis, with that said, when is that the major piece of have you felt being authentic self is just having that self-awareness? Because if people don't want to look inside, if they don't want to reflect, if they just want to focus on the external mountaintop moments, but if they just focus on that, is it really tough then to get better if they just don't have that self-awareness? What have you experienced?
Well, the answer is yes. I think it's really hard to get there. I don't think you can get there without awareness. So one of the things that I see in myself as a leader is showing up in a way that creates an environment. And I think experiences are really powerful here. So putting people through experiences and then point to awareness. And so what in reflection, what did you notice in that experience? Right. We do a lot of practice in the workshops and the facilitation that I do. We do a lot of interactions, but then a lot of reflection. So we'll hit time out and say, okay, what did you notice? Even go around the room, like even in large groups. What did everybody else see about this individual? What did you notice about what they were saying or how their body language was? And so, yeah, I just go back to being aware is so important. And I think you can develop the ability to be aware. It's an uncomfortable place to be. You know, the subconscious is going to drive us, and consciousness is where the magic happens. And the ego stands in between. The ego doesn't want to draw up what we believe about ourselves at times, because you got to work through that in order to be a conscious leader,
Mm-hmm.
be an aware leader. And I think that the opportunity is there for everyone to do that if they can be guided. Sometimes people go through life events and they change the way that they believe about something, those hinge moments. And you talk about in your book, it only takes one. And sometimes one event will create enough awareness in us. And the people that have felt that and gone through it can understand this type of language, what I'm talking about, because it's actually uncomfortable. It's actually uncomfortable to sit with yourself and think, oh man. And I ask this question a lot: where else does that show up?
Mm.
Right. So if we're being a little condescending in conversation, or we're driving and giving a ton of advice and we're not listening, right, then being aware that we're doing that and identify when it started. Right. When did we feel the need to control the conversation or believe that if we take over, we will save the person we're talking to or we'll get the result? Because it started at some point. And
Mm-hmm.
if we can go back to when that started and dissect, is it true? Like, does really telling people what to do, does that solve the problem? Does being commanding and controlling, does that help others become the best version and help change their behavior in a way that aligns with their authentic self? So going back to the question, awareness is uncomfortable. And if you're not feeling uncomfortable, there's probably another layer to go to.
Right. If you're struggling with soreness, pain, or inflammation, you need to check out Stamina Pro recovery patches. Developed for over 15 years, the clinically proven technology of Stamina Pro is free from all chemicals, all pharmaceuticals, all drugs, and it's 100% safe for athletes. I only promote products that I use myself, and Stamina Pro takes care of all my training needs, pain, and soreness. If you use the code DRB15, you get 50% off, or use the link below, Stamina Pro. And you mentioned something that I've always been keen on in terms of the coaching model, but the power in the debrief. I think that's, I mean, in the reflection piece, as you mentioned it, I mean, especially in your meetings, in your workshops that you lead. I mean, people are getting real, they're getting vulnerable in the plans of, hey, not only their self-awareness, but they're just trying to show up as better people, their authentic self. But have you found that to be the real power, man, is in the debrief, in that reflection?
Yeah, I think so. In the moment, we're in the moment, and we don't often see what's happening in the moment because we're just working out of our habits. We're working out of our ingrained belief systems that were ingrained in us from before we have memory. before we can remember we had those beliefs. So we didn't choose as small, what our growing up experience was. But now we can look back and reflect on where it is showing up and reflect back. So, a great example would be doing, I call them real plays, not role plays, but get an actual situation that they're going through currently.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's a conversation they need to have. And a lot of times there'll be some dancing around what I say is the thing, the conversation that wants to happen. Sometimes there's some dancing around that, a lot of padding. And what I've noticed is that we do that so we don't uh, offend another person or see somebody else upset. But sometimes we don't want to see them upset because we're uncomfortable. So the question is, are you padding it for the other person, or are you padding it for yourself? And to be able to stop and say, okay, we noticed the padding. And one of the models that we coach on is just saying what you noticed without emotion. Hey, I noticed that you gave 3 good things before you said the thing that wanted to be said. Right? I just noticed this. Right? So can you reflect on what was showing up for you in that moment? And to be able to go back and think and give time. Sometimes it's a pause on reflection, Rob, where silence does the heavy lifting. And so just allow that silence to happen and that reflection, not from a blame, shame, or guilt, but going forward, how can I take that reflection to be a better version of who I am as a leader? So reflection, looking back in the rearview mirror, is only good as if we're going to apply it and shift going forward. It's actually a
Right.
confidence builder.
There's always a point in like the podcast, Travis, where each episode we kind of title the podcast. So silence does the heavy lifting. I think you might have did it right there, man.
All right, it's a good one.
That is a good one. Like one of the things I've always that attracted me to you was one of our first meetings, and you talked about your North Star. I was hoping you could delve into that and share that with us, but your North Star, and especially how that ties into your authentic self and coaching.
Yeah. I remember you asking that question when we first met and the moment that we shared in that. And to me, playing big is a choice. And what I mean by playing big is showing up in a way that is not comfortable. It's actually maybe a little uncomfortable having a big North Star that drives, and big enough to where it's going to keep going. It's not going to be, to me, it's something that the journey won't end in it. And I shared this with you, but I firmly in my soul believe that every individual, just for the sake of being here on the planet and being the gift and masterpiece that they are, seeing inside of themselves, that seeing in them the masterpiece, the North Star is that every single person deserves and is owed and is worthy of having their own expression, their own life be fully expressed. That everybody has the access to emotional, spiritual, physical care in order to live a fulfilled life. So my North Star is that every single person gets that, gets the emotional, gets the psychological, gets the compassion that they deserve. And so that's a big North Star. And it happens to me, it happens one conversation at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I've shared this a lot, but no single conversation is guaranteed to change the trajectory of a job, a career, or a life, but any one conversation can. So it's up to me to come out from behind myself into the conversation and make it real. And I feel like if I do that, then I'm at least contributing to my part of that North Star.
Absolutely one of my favorite lines, and that was going to be my next question on that one, man, because you teed it up really nice. Well, nicely done. With with that said, I guess my question is like, okay, that showing up all your authentic self and the North Star and empowering people and having people show up, where do you see it breaking down? And what I mean by that is where does that process break down? Whether it's an individual fight, whether it's that civil war they're having with themselves, is it organizationally? Like where have you seen that part that just doesn't connect?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it can be different for different people, but oftentimes, we're either running away from something or running to something. And a lot of times we're just in self-preservation mode. Our minds are to keep us safe. And so we have these feelings. I do an exercise where I actually show an image in large group meetings. I've done this several times where I show an image of a little child crossing the street, and they're looking at their phone or their iPad, and there's a car coming. And then I have them close their eyes and visualize what that feeling is. What do they feel in their body? Right? It's a lot of discomfort. They're either going to run, right, or they're going to freeze. But I have them name what they're feeling. My body is tense, my chest is pounding, my hands are sweaty. And then I have another individual outside that doesn't see that or hear that. They come in and I say, okay, your situation is you're going to enter into an uncomfortable conversation, maybe a conversation with your boss. I've even said, hey, look around the room and who do you not want to have a conversation with? And in a right environment, that's okay. But the feelings are the same. Tighten my chest. My muscles are tight. It's truly that fight or flight response that we're having. And as you've shared too, or fib.
Mm,
Right? So we want to get comfortable as quickly as possible. And so we're gonna do something. We're gonna run towards something or run away from something. And I think where it breaks down, where people get uncomfortable, is that they're having to change their belief system, and they're going to feel uncomfortable. Going into conversations, they're going to feel like a primal urge to run or to just jump in and maybe be overly overbearing. But the truth is, it doesn't have to be one or the other. That's a cognitive distortion. It can be somewhere where you tap in and show up in a different way. But I do think that where it gets stuck is that people are really uncomfortable with with changing the way that they believe, truly changing what they believe. And so I see that and I hear and I really try to listen to the words that people speak, because I believe that the words that people speak are an indication of what they believe about themselves.
hmm
I should have done this or I should do that. Well, should is shame and blame. And so just identifying that, like, it may be comfortable for you to shame and blame yourself, but at the end of the day, I don't believe you came into this world shaming and blaming yourself. I believe you learned that somewhere along the way. It's not good or bad, it just is.
right.
So how can we reprogram that? But yeah, I think that's where it breaks down. I think people are uncomfortable sometimes, and I see this in myself. I say, if I can spot it, I got it. They're uncomfortable with the reality that, man, I'm maybe I'm thinking away or saying something that isn't quite helpful here. So that's where
hmm
it breaks down, is that discomfort of changing the way that you believe, which changes the way that you think. And it can be very unnerving and sometimes disorienting to enter into that space.
When I hear that, what's always interesting to me is our actions are always going to confirm our beliefs.
Yeah.
And it's back to that point, right? If I think that the stock market is bad, then I'm going to show you all the examples of how the stock market's bad.
That's it.
And then it's just getting back to your beliefs, right?
Yeah, I mean, confirmation bias. Our minds are evidence-seeking machines. And so sometimes the end of the book, we know the end of the book, right? And so everything that happens or the way that we're behaving is going to support, it's going to prove that we're right, right? We like to be right, shows us that we're smart, shows us that we have value, external value. And so it's really important, I think, to realize that this confirmation bias exists. And if we're willing to be wrong about something, if we're willing to be wrong about how that last paragraph in the book is how it goes, then we open up the dialogue to the entire book. So confirmation bias is real. People, we have to be aware that we're doing it. I think it's really important to see, wow, okay, I had that belief system, therefore my behavior, going back to door, it was easy to believe that I wasn't going to get a sale because I have 2 days of data points.
Right.
But just because I didn't get a sale those 2 days doesn't mean that I'm not going to on the next door. Just because doesn't mean.
Mm-hmm.
And so in business and work and life, just because the last conversation didn't go well doesn't mean the next one won't go well. But you have to be willing to be wrong about your belief system. And data points are good, but data points aren't perfect. So again, I think it's okay, what are the other possibilities that can happen? And then, Rob, it's okay, so if all these things could happen, which belief is the most helpful? So sometimes like, well, the belief that's most helpful, if I know I can or cannot get the next sale or that conversation with my boss or executive is going to go rough, it could also go good. And so let's say, what belief do you want to have?
Right.
And then step into the conversation with that belief and see what happens.
And is that the part where that ties into playing big is a choice?
Playing big is a choice. And I think sometimes playing small would be to go in to a conversation, to a setting, to a meeting, to an experience, think, okay, what happened before is probably going to happen again. It's safe, it's playing small. Right? But playing big might be, hey man, this might be the biggest conversation. This might be the conversation that changes the trajectory of whatever family member, a parent, a son, a grandma, a friend, a coworker, a colleague, because it's possible. It's possible that the next conversation you have with the next person that you see could change the trajectory. And I think about, John, you had John Madden on the podcast. I remember him listening to,
Joe
or
Joe Madden.
Joe Madden, thank you.
Yep.
And Joe was on the plane and he sat by somebody. And I think the comment was, what you put out there, you get back. And that was it. You know, and that moment, I remember him talking about that moment. And what Joe said was like that shifted the way that he thought. It changed his belief system. And so he showed up in a much better way going forward. But again, I think it's being open. I think it's being open, being curious, and being willing to see things in a different light and coming from that place as well. I think people want to work for, they want to be around open leaders.
Mm-hmm. Travis, with the another hinge moment that happened in your life and how it ties into like coaching, like how has your philosophy of coaching tied into you parenting? And what I mean by that is one of the hinge moments, and you can feel free to talk about this, of course, but it's I mean, adopting two young kids, biracial family. The care, the concern, the love, the compassion that you have, like as a parent, How how did you merge that aspect of your coaching into being a parent as well?
Yeah. Well, I think for me, the underlying principle here is meeting people where they're at. I remember my when my first son was born, and we were having our second. I remember thinking, man, how can I split my heart in two? How is that going to? I remember being so nervous, like, man, I love unconditionally my son no matter what, and how can I love the same? And something magical happens for those that have more than one kid, is you don't chop the heart in two, it grows twice as big.
Hmm.
And so that has happened with every child that I had. And the way that I see it is it grew twice as big, then it grew three times as big. And when we made the decision to adopt, it was a whole different feeling. You when you think about family, traditionally uh, I thought about DNA, like family is blood. And what I realized through that experience is that my heart grew four times and five times. And it wasn't because there was any sort of biological, there was no DNA. It wasn't blood. It was, but I remember being at the hospital when they were born, and something magical happened, like it did with all. It felt the exact same. It felt the exact same. And what it opened up for me was, wow, if I can feel this way with my kids, can I feel this open and loving to other people that I'm not blood related to? And so what it opened up for me again was like, and how I took it forward in life generally was, everybody I can have an open heart and feel that love for. There actually isn't a maximum amount of empathy and compassion and love. I believe that everybody can grow into that. So in each situation, my children are all unique, and I've made a lot of mistakes. And there's a reason to believe that because I've made mistakes as a parent, that I'm going to make another mistake.
Hmm.
And that belief system carries through that way. Just like in the workplace, oh, man, I have a tough relationship with that person, with that individual. Therefore, we just have a tough relationship. So it opened up so many different things, but really just being aware that the way that I viewed family, the way that I viewed my connection with other people was very small. It was very narrow. And and I saw it in my children too. They opened up in a way that, so it's been a beautiful experience. I continually learn what it means to be a father, looking back at how I show up, and how I show up as a coach and as a mentor and as a mentee as well, learning from my kids. I had my son read a book that I got him, and anyway, the narrative is about a man that's supposed to convince three children that the sky is red, and he's able to for the first two kids. He's able to convince them, but on the third kid, the kid says, "No matter what you say, the sky's blue to me. That's my that's my truth." So stands up to the adult. And I asked Jace, I'm like, what did you learn? And he said that you should trust yourself. And if somebody tries to trick you into something that isn't true for you, then you don't have to believe them. And that's the same, that he's 10. It's the same in life. It's the same in family. It's the same in work. Trust in yourself. So there's been so many beautiful experiences. And yeah, being in a biracial family, it's one of those things where my kids are going to have unique challenges. that show up. We've seen them, and all it does is present an opportunity to show up even bigger and with bigger hearts and with bigger compassion. Because I truly believe there is no limit. And I learned that through the experience of adopting
Hmm.
my two kids.
Travis, I love the way you put that, man. That's beautiful. Yep. Really opens my eyes to it as well. Because I always think about it as the end of the Grinch, right? Like when the heart grows three sizes and just
Yeah.
keeps bursting out there, but there's no limit to it. Yeah, that's a great thought, man. With, transition into like your role, VP of coaching and at Ernest, um, and, the executive team leadership that goes along with this, talk about, hey, what is the vision that you have? And you could just lay it out really however you want, man, but with that North Star, with the coaching, with, the executive team that you have. Talk to us about what that vision is for you and the company.
Yeah. Well, it started with Tim, and our owner approached me, and there was some talk with the senior executives about how we were going to take the next step. And so the conversation was really, because this has always been a passion of mine: belief systems, connection, being the best version of ourselves. I just find a lot of value in that. Not that
Hmm.
the nuts and bolts aren't important. I just feel like in any business, these are universal truths that we can tap into. And I think because of that passion, I was approached. Tim had a big vision, and then the buy-in of the senior executive team, and the leadership team in general, to like, hey, do we want to try this thing? Having a VP of coaching is unique. I haven't met another VP of coaching. I think it shows the investment of the leadership team in development of people. And it's not to
Hmm.
say the leaders weren't developing their people. That's not at all what it's saying. It's saying that there's another layer of support that we can offer as a company. And so looking at some of the key folks that drive that initiative, that drive that forward, it's a big vision, and it's a big plan, and it's a lot of, we've been doing it for just over a year. A lot of change management, a lot of change in philosophy, and the feedback that we're getting is that it's really helpful, not only in developing ourselves, it's developing ourselves so that it's coaching so that the results happen. And so I define coaching in my vision, Rob, to answer that question, is I don't think about a coach as sideline yelling at the refs. That is a coach. And I often ask people to close their eyes and just say what comes to mind when they think of a coach: yelling, discipline, uh, all of those principles. But I think actually of like a coach before there was those type of coaches, a coach that hooked onto a horse. And the definition of that kind of coach is pretty simple. It helps people get from where they are today to where they want to go.
Hmm.
To me, that's the vision, and that's what a coach is. So we have to know where people are today, and we have to know where they want to go. And if we can tap into being the coach to guide, to stand next to them in the journey, shoulder to shoulder, and go with them, as long as it matches with our core values, as long as there's a match between where we're going and where they're going. But they're going there no matter whether we cop to it or not. So we might as well find out where they're going and see if we're aligned to that. And if we're aligned to that, then we get all of that effort. I think of the term discretionary effort. It's the effort that people are willing to give if they choose to give it.
Mm.
And we can tap into that discretionary effort if we're aligned both ways, but we got to know where they're going. So that's how I define coaching. I think that's where the opportunity is. It speaks to meeting them where they're at, because you have to start where they are today, wherever they're at in the developmental journey, wherever they're at with the way that they view themselves inside the organization. and what their potential is. Where do you want to go? Where do you want to go? What do you want? What do you really want? Where do you really want to go? And you'll find as a leader, I think, as you really are curious and you stay curious and you keep going deeper to tap into their mind, their heart, and their gut, all of them, where you feel it. If you can tap into that, and if every employee was free to go there and it aligns with the company, the results are a byproduct of each individual becoming their best version of themselves.
When we had Greg Campy on the podcast, and he talked about that exact thing, just finding in his players where is it that they want to go, their values, and then tethering the team's values, the team's culture into making that mesh. It sounds like, I mean, you're saying the exact same thing, right? Finding what drives them, what do they value, what do they want, where do they want to go, and having that journey along with the company's vision, the company's mission, and reaching those goals together.
Yeah, one thing that Greg shared with me, and I love his leadership philosophy, is that it isn't about leading from the front and it's not about leading from behind and pushing. It's actually about leading in the middle and walking with them. I
Yeah.
think of, yeah, absolutely. And so their core values are just as important as your core, as my core values. There's no hierarchy in what core values are. So finding what theirs are and aligning it with what yours are, that's where you get to walk next to the person.
And you know, when he said that as well, and I love the way that you put that, the one thing that popped in my mind, it's like if we're bike riding, right? If we're in a peloton, so if we're in a group, there are two places in that are rough. Number one is at the front because you're the one that's pushing it. There's no one blocking the wind, anything like that. So you're pushing it. And then the second place that's kind of scary is at the back. And the reason why is because, yeah, there's nobody behind you, but you have to stay on that wheel in front of you or you're going to get dropped pretty quick because it's that slinky effect, right? Like once that first bike starts to move a little bit, everyone's along with them. You're the last one to feel it. So there's kind of that whip effect. So you can get dropped really quick if you're on the back. You know where the safest part is? In the middle. And you might not think it, right? You might think it's like, well, I mean, there's a lot of bikes around, they could mesh, but like, look, if you're holding your line and you're in sync, yeah, accidents are going to happen. That's part of it, but still, that's the safest part is because you're not going to get dropped and you don't have to like do the pushing as well.
Yeah, I think it speaks to the intelligence behind that too. It's being aware that that is the spot where you can make a play and you're not going to be stuck. And also, I think of birds, right? They fly in that V shape and they take a turn. And in the book Gung Ho, they call it the gift. He calls it the gift of the goose, which is where that sound that they're making, the belief is to cheer that leader on, right? To keep that momentum up. And then they take a turn, right? They shift. And so leading from the front, there's value, right? And clearly in the back, there's but if the person in the back does shift or is able to shift and support the team and everybody takes a turn, it truly is. And to this day, when I hear geese and I hear
Hmm.
the call happening, I say the gift of the goose, man. The gift of the goose is supporting each other, taking a turn. But yeah, I mean, being in the middle is the place to be when you're walking alongside somebody. It
Hmm.
is safe. I think it's also meaningful when you're walking next to individuals. There's a level of illumination that happens when you're willing to stand next to them. And David Brooks, How to Know a Person. I recommend that book to everybody. But he talks about illuminators, and illuminators are willing to walk next to people on their journey. Right? Diminishers feel like they need to be the one to push, or they need to be the one to, you know, and I often hear like, hey, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. I think that saying is missing a little bit of the point. Like, what if you walked next to the horse, spoke to the horse, right? And help the horse get going where it wants to go. I think dragging people, I think that comes from like the way sometimes that we were raised, probably that command and control system. And the reality is, we don't really have control. Control is an illusion. Control is what we allow other people um, to feel. But at the end of the day, we are at choice.
Mm-hmm.
And trust me, if a horse wants to turn around and run the other way, I don't think a rope's gonna help very much. So yeah, I guess you can lead a horse to water if it wants to drink.
In terms of the creativity and peace and coaching, talk to us about your piano playing because I found you to be an excellent piano player, and you sent me a video of you playing. I think it's fantastic. I've watched it a few times. I wouldn't say several, but I definitely watched it a few times, which is saying something, right? Because I mean that's impressive. But talk to us about that journey that you were on there.
Yeah, I think that when I started opening myself up and becoming aware and becoming of who I truly was, I always had a desire, and I love music. I love piano music. My mom grew up, she played the piano, and in the mornings I remember waking up to her playing the piano, and there was just something about that. And so I didn't play for a while, and it was funny. I was at a meeting and I wrote down a prompt, which was, when did I stop playing the piano? When did I stop singing? When did I stop dancing? And I realized that because life had happened, that I had kind of left that to the wayside, and I also wasn't really honoring myself because I enjoyed that. So while I had taken some lessons as a kid, I sort of let that passion and desire go. And so as I opened up as a leader, I opened up all parts of me. And so I find great comfort and grounding, usually at the end of the day. And I used to play well-known songs, and then I thought, I think I do have the creativity inside of me to write some of my own music. And it's really interesting when I have a day at work or with my family and I'm feeling emotion, that I can sit down and then express that emotion through music. And people can do it in a lot of different ways. There's tons of ways to express what we're feeling inside, because sometimes words don't do it. I mean, words are a construct of how we're feeling, but it's it's only as good as what our vocabulary is. And so music is just another outlet, I think, to express and to feel truly who we are. So thanks for the compliment. I appreciate
Yeah.
it. I have a lot of
I
fun
love
doing it.
Oh, I'm a music fan myself, but I love the majestic of song as well. I think like if there's the I love piano. Um, I love a lot of different instruments. The thing about the human voice that's interesting to me, the part that I like is, and obviously there are many people who agree with it, or they wouldn't have so many shows on the voice. But my point is like there's no hiding behind like a singular voice and one that can reach certain notes, and I think it touches like the soul. And then if you get a group of people in unison, I think that's transcendent.
Yeah, I think there's something about that. And I think it speaks um, past just the act of singing. I think voice, storytelling, it really is a way to open up and to show. I mean, what greater way to show and to be open than to stand and to sing.
Hmm.
And I love your thought too, about doing it. The thing about music too is, we talked about silence doing the heavy lifting. There's no music without silence. No matter how small those breaks are in between notes, that's where the music happens, is those pauses and those rests. And they're placed there intentionally, But I often think when I'm playing, like reminding myself that the breaks, right? The breaks make the music, just like the silence in conversation makes the conversation, tying that piece back in.
I was pausing there on purpose, Travis. That's great, man. Travis, one of the questions I always ask is like, what have I missing? What question should I be asking that I'm not asking? What have I missed in our conversation? Because I've really enjoyed this.
That's a great question. I think one question that there's so many good questions out there. Um, I think one question that I like to ask, and I ask myself, is what have you been wrong? What have you been wrong about lately? And the reason I like that question is because in the moment, we haven't, we don't often think we give bad advice in the moment, right? So people, when's the last time you gave have you ever given bad advice? Yeah, I've given bad advice. Okay, when was the last time you gave bad advice? And what was the advice that you gave? So I think it opens up like a certain amount of vulnerability. I think people like working for people that are willing to be wrong. And so maybe that's a question. What was the last thing I was wrong about? And what
Good
did I
one.
learn from
I love that. Why don't you take it?
it? Now I got to pause for just a second. Um, I think one of them that shows up for me is I had a conversation that was wanting to happen. I never say a conversation that needed to happen or have to happen. Uh, I use those words very, very cautiously, the have and the need to, because I
Mm.
just think we get to. So there was a conversation and that wanted to happen. And I did the thing where I projected what that conversation was going to look like, meaning I geared up for the battle. And I didn't realize I was doing it at the time, but I really was. And I was playing out all of the scenarios, which isn't a bad thing to do, but I was playing out all the scenarios that where it's going to go wrong and where the tension's going to be and how it's going to show up. And I was wrong about that conversation. There was a level of openness and curiosity, and it was about an individual, one of the leaders in the company, and it was about that conversation was with them, and it was how I could better support them. And I expect a little bit of resistance, maybe a little get off my lawn. And what I found in that conversation was a level of genuine caring and desire and curiosity reflecting back to me. And so I was wrong about that conversation. I spent a lot of time worrying about that conversation. And yeah, it just reminded me that I'm wrong sometimes. And in reflection, if I would have, if I can next time step into that conversation where I'm showing up with positivity and showing up in possibility, then I believe I can get even more from that conversation myself. So it's really living the work, as I like to say, and that's why I love my job, man. And I'll just share that whenever I engage in conversation with an individual or in a large group, I learn more about myself. I think I have the best job because I learn more about myself because it's reflected back over, a team of 10 or 50 or 100 people in a group setting like that. I get to learn from 100 individuals full time. And for somebody that, for me, that I always, I want to learn, I want to grow. Something inside of me just craves that. It gets fulfilled. And I hope that it's fulfilled two ways and that it's a relationship of reciprocity. That would be my goal and vision.
Yeah, Travis, great interview, man. Way to bring it. Um, a couple of those pieces, silence does the heavy lifting. I don't even know now if that is going to be the title because we got playing big as a choice. There's no hierarchy and core values. When did I stop playing piano? And living the work, man. So excellent, excellent job. Thank you again for joining us, man. And Travis, I'll put the links on there, man. But just wanted to tell you appreciate you and thanks for showing up, man.
Yeah, man, I appreciate Rob. We've worked together for a little bit of time, and you've put a lot of effort into Ernest Packaging, coaching individuals and supporting them, and just such positive feedback we get from the group universally, and it's repeated. So I want to thank you for everything you've given to us, which is just you and who you are showing up, being you. So I want to thank you, and thanks for having me on the podcast, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks, brother.
All right.
Hey, golfers, you might not even know that you're looking for it, but this is the best golf sock that you can have. The golf sock. Their grip technology is absolutely stunning. I even use it when I'm running. That's how good these socks are. You're absolutely going to love it. It's like a golf glove for your feet. The golf sock. Click on the link.